why am I here and why this event? Well, it was actually Clayton who asked me the question around recovery, and particularly in a work context. And at that point, I texted Jonah and Chris and said, guys, tell me about recovery. I thought, oh, well, on the back of those conversations, I thought, why not pull something together around it? And so appreciate you guys coming along, and we'll be interesting to see how we go on the art and science of all of this stuff. And really, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you guys here. Thank you. Both two guys have had a really big impact on me as a sportsman and professionally as well, in business context and all sorts of stuff. So, and great mates as well. So it's really nice to be able to, I guess, access the insights that you guys have and the experience that you guys have. And so it's going to be a really interesting discussion. To give some context, so Chris is the head of strength and conditioning out at the Queensland Academy of Sport. I first met Chris, was it the first gig that you ever did?
Pretty
with
much,
water polo?
Yeah, first job out of uni.
First job out at uni?
Yep.
Okay, was with our water polo squad, and that was in 1999. And at that point, Chris was 95 kilos, and he rapidly expanded from 95 to about 130, and it was it's been one of the things that I pride myself on, is I find someone who's already done it and then try to copy them. So I said, oh, Chris, teach me how you did it and do it, and let's jump into it. And I think in terms of the collaboration as well, as an athlete and a strength and conditioning coach, there was always a sense of Chris was experimenting and then sharing the lessons of the stuff that worked and across all of his clients and stuff, and how that would apply to me. So that's been really fun. He's also a bit of an entrepreneur, with having developed a few different physical training products. He's done applied sports science research. He's a PhD. So we have a wealth of knowledge here in Chris around the physical aspect. And then we have Jonah Oliver. So thanks, Jonah, as well, for coming along. Jonah, water polo is the common thread here. I met Jonah playing water polo at uni games and those sorts of things, which was less about recovery, but let's be frank about that. And Jonah has, since those early days at university, we've kept in touch. He's gone on to become one of the best, one of the top performance psychologists here in Australia and globally, working with international clients and stuff as well. And an executive coach, and in fact in my marketing business last year, Jonah helped out me and my business partner as well. And he introduced me to the idea of values-based decision making, and has ignited a passion in me, and obviously you're particularly passionate about that too. So there's a whole bunch of things to me that these guys represent that I'm really excited to be able to tap into, and hopefully you guys will have a whole bunch of questions too. So tonight we have deep expertise in the physical and the mental side of recovery and performance more broadly. And I think the combination of that is where they overlap is really interesting to me too, as an ex-athlete, I guess, and a daily try-hard warrior now compared to what I once was, but that's okay. And it was a really broad experience between the two guys too. One of the things Chris actually last night sent me a slide deck that he had presented at a forum called World Class to World Best. And in that there was a quote on one of the slides that said 0.4% improvement is competitively significant. And I thought, wow, okay. That puts a bit of context in terms of what these guys have dedicated their lives to, in terms of that degree of those microcosms of improvement, I guess. And not that we're all looking for 0.4% improvement in what we're doing, and perhaps substantially bigger than that. But to me, the concepts and ideas and principles that are tested under those environments, and then the lessons from those is what I'm hoping to unpack, and then how we take those lessons and apply them in our daily lives, to me, forms the basis of tonight's discussion. So let's jump into the first round, and really just to give some context as well for the audience. Chris, I'll start with you. How did you get started, and what's been your journey to here?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Toby, and thanks for everyone coming along. I loved sport as a kid growing up, and I still remember to my year 12, guidance counsellor said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a trainer to the stars." And he actually laughed at me. Who's laughing now? And look, I was just fortunate to meet really good people along the way. I worked hard, but I met good people who gave me good opportunities along the way. I worked, the classic 6 to 7 jobs when I first finished uni, and that was before strength and conditioning was you could go out and get a full-time job, so you had to do a bit here, a bit there. And I guess dealing with different people helped form my craft. Got an opportunity to work with Wallabies, and by chance then went to England. Never been to Europe in my life. And they said, "Oh, Bath, that's a lovely place." I had no idea. I said, "Oh, okay, lovely." So 6 years there, and once again, fortunate to meet some really good people. And along the way, I guess I turned from being a coach to seeing the other side, the science behind it. But still, I think at the end of the day, I'm a pretty practical guy. I love to hang out at the gym and lift weights, and I keep it simple.
You'd never guess.
Yeah, and I like to eat. And but I guess I got a deeper understanding as to why things worked. We all have intuition as to why something works. We just know it does. But I got I met a world-renowned expert on hormones, and we did some projects together, and that just expanded my eyes as to the science behind why something works. And from that point, I did some studies on Bath rugby, and the data was unbelievable. It was just a really, like when you sit down and look at it, it's just a cool story. And I decided to formalise it, did my thesis, got back, had my first child, missed the sunshine, came back to Australia, and just been in sport ever since. And I guess it's just a relationship of meeting really good people along the way, having great opportunities, meeting good mentors, and capitalising on those opportunities when they come around. And I just guess it's like the deeper I go into the rabbit hole of understanding why something works, I just want to keep going deeper and deeper, and just, I guess, capitalising on that. And that's some of the entrepreneurial stuff that I do. Fortunate that I could lean back on Toby now, so he used to come to me as a strength coach, and I came back to him as some guidance, and it's
good fun, swings and roundabouts.
And I just love it. I just enjoy what I do, and I have lots of little things on the boil, and love coming here and just talking to people.
Yeah, cool, thanks mate. And so Jonah, the start for you and the journey to date, to give some context.
I was a 12-year-old tennis player who couldn't get it done. I used to get really nervous and really struggled, but yet as a water polo player, I loved the biggest occasion. At 12 or 13, I was playing A-grade water polo, and I'd get MVP on grand final day. I loved it. There was something about the team, not wanting to let my teammates down. I don't know what it was. But I had this real, conflicting sort of mentality around it. And a sports psych one day came and did a presentation at a junior tennis tournament I was at, and it just light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, that made sense to me of why I was doing what I was doing. And then I thought, the old, what do you want to be when you want to grow up? So from that day, at the age of 12, I said, I want to be a sports psychologist. So I did. So I went to uni and did my double degrees and honours and masters, and jumped into a PhD in the same lab that Chris was doing his and things. And loved that. During my masters though, I went to prison. Not literally, as in I didn't cross the line. All my colleagues were going out to the QAS and to the AIS and doing placements and working with a under 16s hockey team or something. And I said to my placement coordinator, I said, I want to go to prison. And they said, why? And I said, well, I reckon the guys and girls that I want to work with at the very pointy end of elite sport are pretty extreme. The pressures they're under are pretty extreme, therefore the psychology they might possess should be pretty extreme. And I reckon the people locked up at that prison might have some similar attributes, or working with them might be that. So I went and did a couple of months placement. They ended up offering me a job. I said no, but I spent 6 months there. And I think what that showed me was, if you're going to help people change behaviour, you've got to be really good at what you do, and you've got to really understand the theory behind human behaviour, because so much of what I was taught didn't work. And that was really cool. It was a bit disheartening, but it was a really cool moment early in my career to go, what I'm getting taught isn't helping these people, and I need to be taught something new. So I went on a journey which I can share with as we go through tonight, maybe a bit of how I almost retrained post-university into a whole new area within psychology. And then people say, why is my career so successful? And I say, it's not me or my personality, it's my training. I feel like I've hooked into something that's really effective, simple, powerful, and works. And so that's where my passion piece comes. And the cool part is I'm one of those annoying guys who gets to live the job that you dreamed of. You know, I spent 4 years with Porsche winning Le Mans and World Championships with Mark Webber's team. I work with AFL teams and NRL teams and V8 supercars and really cool corporate clients who have interesting problems to solve. And I think that's what excites me, is just solving problems. I've always been a bit nerdy. I like crossword puzzles and I like complex things. And so for me, it doesn't matter if it's trying to win a world championship or trying to float your company or trying to be a better leader and dial up engagement within your work, your employees. It's all a complex problem. How can we help navigate that? And that's what sort of excites me.
And people underpin all of that, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's jump, the topic is recovery and the art and science of it, and clearly there's a bit of a mix of both. So what I'm interested in, thinking back on my own journey with recovery, one of the early anecdotes from my story, I think, was an early water polo coach, the day before a grand final, at the pool. And he said, okay, kids, I've heard about this thing called carbo loading. After this training today, you can eat as much ice cream as you want and you'll be ready for your grand final tomorrow. And literally, and that was, I guess, probably early 90s. And I think, wow, okay, so if ice cream is a recovery tool and the way to go, then I was pretty stoked with it at the time. But clearly things have evolved substantially since then. And I'm really interested to hear from you guys. I might start with you, Jonah, but what does recovery mean to you, and why is it important?
Yeah, interesting topic. And I was actually really interested when you first contacted me and said, can we talk about that? And I went, wow, that's really cool. Like, we live and breathe recovery in elite sport, right? My AFL player might be on $500 to $1 million, and nobody questions how important his recovery is. They wear watches, we do daily monitoring, we track their wellness every morning, we take their cortisol levels, their urine samples, we do all this work. And I sit back and think about something like, you've got the family house on the line, you've got all your investment into your business that you've spent so many years building up, you've got a net worth of a lot more than an AFL salary on the line. So in the corporate sector, there's so much often, bigger things at stake, yet no one talks about recovery in the corporate space. So I think tonight's actually a really, really interesting sort of conversation to start. When I think recovery, my brain as a psychologist goes to, it's not the amount of stress you're exposed to, it's the amount of recovery you've got to counterbalance it. So a lot of my athletes are exposed to incredible amounts of stress. I mean, you want to hang out with my UFC fighter when he's getting ready for a fight in the octagon, there's a huge amount of anticipatory anxiety, right? And the dump afterwards massive, from sort of standing, metaphorically pretty naked before the world and being pretty vulnerable. But they're fine, as long as there's the right recovery protocols in place. So for me, when I think about recovery, I always think in a bit of a scale. Is the level of stress you're exposed to simply matched by the recovery protocols you have in place?
Cool. Awesome. Chris?
Actually, probably the story that springs to mind, State of Origin, start working with the team and they go, how are you going to improve performance? And, initially all these things come to mind. And then when I sort of sat and thought about the question a little bit more, in a 10-day Origin camp, it's actually not necessarily about performance enhancement. Because they've been playing week in, week out, they come in pretty bruised and battered. And it's actually a period of time to actually just to restore them back to normal. These are exceptional athletes. The ability to get 0.4% improvement is pretty hard, and you don't get opportunities. And in 10 days, what are we going to do? Not much. So how can we provide an environment to them so that they're going to be at their optimum? Because we know if they perform at their best, they're going to perform well for us. So it's just about, the environment. For me, it's the environment you create. So it doesn't matter where you are. You look at the language that we talk about, when you see ambient vision around, this all has a purpose in its place, and colours and so forth. So you know, how do we get someone back to their optimum, you know, in a short period of time? That's the challenge.
And sort of condensing that time frame, and is that sort of how you view recovery then? As a
Yeah, just to be as smart as possible, because there's so much stuff out there, and when you look at everything on recovery, you know, you've got so many options out there. But when it all boils down to is that it's all individual, it's all subjective. If you believe it's going to work, if you believe ice cream's going to work and going to make you recover and perform well, and you perform well, you all of a sudden start associating the two. And that's whether it becomes a ritual or whatever.
That's my problem.
Well, there's actually, there's been shown to be chocolate milk to be just as an effective recovery drink than all your Gatorades and your protein drinks. You know, Oak come out and say, we've got this wonderful protein drink. It's got 30 grams of protein. If you pick up a normal chocolate milk, it's got 21 grams. So you know, there's people kind of hang their hat on this one or two thing, but it depends on what you look at. It is actually individual. If you believe something's going to work, so whether it's cryotherapy or you know, flotation tanks, the brain helps rule the body, and that's, you know, obviously Jonah's part. But that's where a lot of my work kind of went to, is we looked at all this physical stuff that we do in the gym, but actually now it's starting to move to, well, how can we be smarter about what we do? We don't want to spend energy in, you know, hard energy in recovering. How can we be smart to recover passively? Or actually, in some of our line, how can we potentiate or prepare our bodies for competition, or, you know, in a business case, you know, important meetings and so forth? How can we do things at a low energy cost?
Interesting. Okay, and I'm also interested in how you've seen recovery as an idea change over the years. So I mean, certainly, you know, my example, the ice cream, to, you know, substantially more sophisticated than that. But have you seen transitions in that and changes? And have you been surprised, I guess, by, or have there been any surprises along the line of that?
The biggest shift probably in the psychology domain would be, it used to be very passive, right? What's recovery? Go on a holiday, go to the beach, get a mass, you know, do something very, very, very passive, and that used to be, you know, that time out mentality, you know. Whereas you actually look now at the evidence, and it needs to be a nice balance between passive and active being doing things. So, and I'm very big on saying, when you engage in the domains in your life, when I talk about domains, I'm talking about, like, you've got yourself, your identity as an employee or as a CEO or a business owner. Then you've got, maybe I'm a brother or a husband or a parent or a friend, but I've also got hobbies and I've got interests and I like to learn, I like to look after my health and fitness, and I like my community, and I believe in the environment. We all have these domains that matter to us, and we're all different. What you find is if you actually engage in active recovery strategies that tap into those important domains, you get a really good recovery effect. So you might be absolutely shagged from a really long week, and you've been pushing, travelling, doing all the usual things, and you just want to sit in front and watch TV, but you go and do something more active, like, you know, take your kids to the beach and actually do some things that you think, oh, that's going to really make me exhausted. And you find you go into work Monday morning and you got pep in your step. So it's the belief of doing things that aren't just decompressing, doing less, but sometimes actually doing more can actually get a good recovery effect. That's probably some of the stuff I've been more interested in learning about probably in the last decade, whereas traditionally any book on recovery would say, you know, go lie beside a waterfall and do some meditation. That's one element, and it's a really important element. Meditation's great, but there's other things that I think get just as big an effect.
Yeah, cool. Very interesting. Chris, transition or and any surprises along the way?
Probably just going on that point is, we actually find in terms of athletes, they are better for doing something on their day off. You know, when they come in on a Monday, they're quite sluggish, and you actually say, oh, we've gone to the beach yesterday, and all of a sudden their performance during the week actually sets them up quite nicely. It's obviously been a huge explosion on the amount of, I guess with social media and so forth, the amount of toys and gizmos out there. I think the accessibility to it and the knowledge has increased. So, you know, go back and 10 years ago, probably who would have heard of cryotherapy? Now you can go, there's 3 or 4 places here in Brisbane you can go to. Has some really great benefits.
For those who don't know what cryotherapy is?
So cryotherapy is you go into like a low gas or an air temperature, like minus 100 odd degrees. So they used, there's one way.
That's pretty low.
Yeah, so, but because they use a gas, you can actually, you can withstand it. So it's actually better than, say, 9 degrees of cold water immersion. So it's actually bearable. They used a lot of it in Poland initially, and then obviously spread to Europe, and then, you know, there's a commercialization of it, and it's actually just spread. So there's an electricity version, and there's a gas version, and some will talk about which is more effective. But, and I guess that's it. It's like I think the education, there's so much more information out there that people can start to make more informed decisions, and the affordabilities, I guess, has improved. So you can actually trial something and go, well, I didn't like it, and that's fine, but you might find something else. I was talking to an athlete the other day, and I said, I'm not that old, but back in my day, there was no foam roller. And you see everyone now with the foam roller, and now they're all vibrating, whatever. And she said, what did you do? I had a stretch, I got some, went to the physio, I just got on with it, you know? So, yeah, it's been an explosion, but, you know, I think you need to be able, with the education, you need to be able to cut the chaff out from that, you know?
Yeah, I'm really keen to come back to some of that stuff, because clearly, you know, there's sort of the 0.4% increments, and then there are fundamentals. And I remember hearing Andy Walsh, who's the head of high performance at Red Bull, say, you know, all this stuff I'm talking about here is really interesting and fascinating and sexy, but actually the guys still need to swim their laps, they still need to do their push-ups, they still need to do their core work. You know, like, I'm fascinated between sort of, you know, what's the core and the fundamentals versus the fun, really, and the gizmos and gadgets.
And probably the point with that is we talk about big rocks, you know, in our workplace. So, you know, you can look at all this sexy stuff, but, you know, until you're getting your sleep right, you know, your work-life balance right, you know, the stresses at work, the stresses at home, your nutrition right. You know, how easy it is to just go and get something from the bakery, or you know, get 21 grams of sugar out of a can, which makes you feel instantly good, but then obviously you hit a massive lull afterwards. So that's what we talk about. You know, we could look at all this hormonal sampling and, you know, hormonal priming and all this really cool, fun stuff, but until we're getting that right, you know, you're almost just wasting your time.
Yeah. So next question, do you see, I mean, we sort of touched on it a little bit, but like common mistakes or misconceptions people have around recovery? Start with you, Chris.
Yeah, there's little things, you know, the role of cold water immersion, like it has its place, but, you know, in terms of sport, there's, like everything, there's time and place for everything.
So specifically, you saying like people seeing cold water immersion as like the be all and end all of recovery?
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not necessarily the case.
Well, and actually just recovery full stop, because people see as stress and they want to get rid of the stress. But, you know, I think in all facets of life, we actually need stress on our bodies, whether it's mental or physical, to actually respond and grow. In terms of a physical sense, when we're at bath, you know, this is when cold water immersion first came out. Every session, we're in the cold pool, but then you can hang on. The reason why we're training is to actually stress the body so we can adapt to the stress. So if we keep blunting that response, our body never learns. So if we're in a workplace and we actually say, well, you know, we've got to be careful how we're doing this. If you have the stress of a situation, but you're able to reflect and learn from that, you actually grow from that occasion. So I guess it's when you have the supportive team around you to say, hey, look, stress is okay, and this is a period of time where we've got to work hard, we've got to get through this. But at that period of time, at the end of that hard working block, whether it's physical or work or cognitive load, you know, it's that debrief. And I think it's when you look at what we do in our work, even in my working life, I spend so much time planning for everyone else and working on the floor, coaching, but I don't spend time I spend time to reflect, but I think a lot of people are so busy that they go, well, where's my reflection process at the end of that period of time? What did I do well? So when I'm driving home in the car, I go, you know, what was I happy with today? What did I like? And what didn't I like that I did, and what can I do better? So I'm just continuing that reflection process.
Yeah, cool. We'll definitely be coming back to that, I think. Jonah, misconceptions or common mistakes?
Yeah, sure. I'll use a metaphor. I think that a very traditional concept of stress reduction is, if I always use when I'm working with clients, I'll have generally a cup of water or a coffee cup on my table, and I say, so, and let's say they've come to me because they're stressed, feeling overwhelmed, usual sort of stuff. I say, so let's just look at this cup. You're telling me that the cup's getting fuller and fuller and fuller, and what happened? One staff member said X, and I exploded, overflowed, sent the email really emotively, or I'm being a real prick at home to the family, or whatever's going on, right? And they, yeah, Jonah, I need some work to bring the water level down. We're going to stop, overflowing with my stress. And I say, yeah, okay. So what do we need to do? Stop, take a breath. Talk to yourself more kindly, have a little cue word on your wall, and, snap a rubber band on your wrist, or And then I love pulling out a much bigger water jug and putting it on the table and saying, why don't we just make you a bigger vessel? You want to be a high-flying CEO, you want to be an AFL player, you want to be a world champion, mate, you've got to learn to handle a lot more stress in your life. So instead of using me to reduce your stress, how about you come and see me, and we'll turn you just into a much bigger vessel so you can handle what all life throws at you, because life is stressful. So it's actually, instead of doing stress reduction techniques, I do expansion techniques, which means I can tolerate more of what comes my way. Yeah. And part of that also isn't just handling more stress, it's your interpretation of stress. Yeah. Thoughts don't create stress hormones. Thoughts don't create cortisol. Any textbook that says that, set fire to it. It's a lie. Your interpretation of that thought, or the meaning of that thought, or your attachment to that being a good or a bad thought is what leads to the elevated cortisol and adrenal response. So if you can start to change your relationship to your worry, I don't get stressed about making toast in the morning. I get worried about whether my 2.5-year-old's going to ride a bike on the road and get hit or something. Things that matter, things that are meaningful. You're meant to stress about things that matter. So the likelihood of me having that thought is logical. Can I change the way I navigate that? And it doesn't actually affect me as much as before. So for me, the big shift in a long-winded way to answer your question is, instead of stress reduction, it's grow your capacity to handle it, and then also change your interpretation of what that is.
Yeah, cool. And I think, for me, the question that we were hoping to really dig into is, how do we not just survive but thrive in an environment of uncertainty and increasing change and technology influence and all this stuff, and this feeling that life is getting faster and faster and faster for our generation, like it's never ever been before, and clearly it has been in other times and periods and what have you. But and so really, I'm super interested in that concept, and Chris, you've touched on it as well, in terms of your building capacity and this concept of, I don't know if you guys have come across it, but anti-fragile, where it's not just it's under stress is where we grow, and if we have that capacity, and of course it's sort of got to be survivable stress, and we'll dig into some more of that as well, but that capacity to, if you lift a 50 kilo bar or try to and you don't make it, it's not, your body doesn't compensate to help you lift a 50 kilo bar, it overcompensates. And so the idea is that that's where the growth is from a physical standpoint, and by the sounds of things, absolutely in a mental.
Identical. It's a great book. Those who want to read the book, Anti-Fragile. Good book, good read.
So yeah, let's talk about some of this stuff, like the good stress versus bad stress, and just how we think about stress generally. And yeah, if you're happy to talk to those.
As psychologists, we use a concept called eustress, eustress versus distress, right? So distress, bad stress, eustress, has a positive effect or not harmful. And it's really important to start to look at a lot of the things in your life, and we're quickly hooked into a distress style of coping, when in fact so much of what we do is actually in the service of things that matter. And I actually, think about everyone here tonight, just think back to something that was really significant that you did. It might have been a university degree, it might be a piece of work, it might be proposing, it might be running a marathon, it might something that stretched you, challenged you, and you had to use all of your capacity and resources to achieve that. Think back to the emotion you're feeling in the lead up to that. How did you feel before you got that good grade? How did you feel before you ran that half marathon? How did you feel before you proposed? How did you feel before you floated your company? Generally, it's anxious, worried, uncertain, sleepless, self-critical, doubtful. It's actually a lot of the negative, what we classify, as these tough negative experiences. Yet the outcome was something really amazing and meaningful. So, if you can start to see that strong emotion is more sometimes as an alarm clock. I always use mine as an alarm clock. Ding, 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 I'm starting to feel a bit whatever. Must mean I'm about to do something that matters. Must mean I'm doing something of importance. Must mean I need to listen to that and, interpret it in the way I can. So if you can start to see some of your stress as, not distress, but eustress, that's the only way you grow. So to your point on anti-fragility, it's the only way you grow. And it's in all domains. Pain threshold. You only grow your pain threshold by feeling pain. You can only go harder in your max VO2 test by pushing yourself there, learning you didn't die, updating the mental model and going again, right? And then women who give birth, we know we can crunch their knuckle, test their pain threshold, and then afterwards you crunch their thumb again and give me a rating out of 10 on pain, and it's not surprisingly lower. Like it shifts, right? Same as people who's, can handle really intense things. It's about we want to expose them to it. So if you want to live a life where you do challenging, interesting, complex things, but you just don't like that feeling, those butterflies, that discomfort, that anxiety, you're not friends with it, you're not comfortable with it, I'd say maybe you need to start changing that relationship. Because otherwise it holds us back from doing what matters. Yeah. Cool.
And how do you see sort of so eustress or good stress versus bad stress? Certainly in a physical sense, Chris, I often think of that sort of fine line between, doing what you need to do versus overload, and sort of stretch and overload. And I think back through definitely in my water polo career, a head coach, who put us under incredible duress, and in fact, in a lot of ways now, I think my capacity was enormously expanded thanks to work, and that's taken a while to reach that gratitude point, I must admit. But at the time, I wish I'd had a mental model that felt like this was a growth thing. But when you're swimming 200s in t-shirts. And you're doing 10 of those and you're wondering why you've got a t-shirt on and all that sort of stuff. But sort of the ability to sort of build through a physical, I think there's sort of the overlap here as well. So Jonah, jump in too, but sort of the overlap of the physical pressure requiring a mental dimension as well. But I'd be interested, obviously, on the physical side. How do you sort of watch that? How do you look for signs of overload versus just good stretch of capacity?
And that's pretty much what I'm trying to do at certain times. I'm trying to take people to the edge, but I think the key there is that everything's got to have a purpose. And it would have been interesting if at the end of that, it's taken you years to get over it, but if
to be grateful for it.
But at the right point, when you have the right debrief with the right people around you to actually say, this is the real reason why you did it, I think that puts the whole stress into a different context to say, look, you did something unbelievable, and look what we've been able to achieve as a result of it. Training at altitude with the Gold Coast Suns, and guys were running and they looked distressed. But the big lesson from them is that we're not going to die. Look, you're still walking. You survived it. You're able to do something that you physically and mentally didn't think it was possible. And if you have the right mentors or the right support staff around you to actually have the right debrief, I think it changes the context to kind of go from, okay, I was distressed, but no, actually it was capacity building, and then they learn from that, and then at times you can then draw on that in those times of stress to go, you remember back when we did this. And, Jonah, you just said it took us back to a point in our life. And, when you can draw on those feelings and emotions, that has a cascading effect from, it's psychophysiological, is it that mixture of, you're able to let the brain actually help improve performance of the body, and when you can draw on those experiences.
Can I throw another metaphor out?
Yeah.
And probably the one thing that was missing in your experience early on was exactly that, the why.
Absolutely. And I've reflected on that since and thought, if someone had told me at the beginning that this is why we're doing this, I would have been, the tolerance,
the context, right?
Been
if you
very
understand
different,
the context. So for me, a good high performance director sits down with a group of footy players, for example, and says, we're going to get really hurt today. We're going to go into the pit. We're going to really push the top speed, high end running, lactic thresholds, That's his area. It's going to hurt. But you know how we lost the grand final last year in the final quarter when the other team just ran over us? Who remembers that? Yeah. How painful was that? And we made a commitment to each other that that wasn't going to happen. That's what today's about. Everybody keen? And normally you see everyone keen, right? I'm willing to feel the pain. The metaphor I use in therapy is one of my favourites, is I put a bunch of broken glass metaphorically. I say, let me just smash a whole bunch of wine bottles on the floor here, and we're going to do some motivational walking, like the good old American sort of pop psych stuff. So, take your shoes off. It's going to cut both feet. You're not going to die, but it's definitely going to cut. Probably going to be in a wheelchair for 3 weeks while the stitches heal up, and it's going to really hurt. You're keen. Yeah, normally you get a few responses with expletives and things in there like, no thanks, Jonah. I say, cool, no worries. Let me just change one thing. Same glass, same cut, same pain, 3 weeks, wheelchair, ouch, stitches, yep, same deal. But at the end, I'll guarantee that every one of your hopes, dreams and aspirations will come true. And everyone you love and care for, the people that really matter in your life, will have a rich and meaningful life free from harm and suffering. Would you be keen to walk over that broken glass? And I'm yet to see a couple of people, but generally to a point,
That's not part of couples counselling.
Correct. Generally to a point where we're taking our shoes off, we're willing to go over it. And I say, cool, what does that show? And people sort of sit, and I say, what it shows me is that humans are crap at feeling pointless pain. Humans are crap at feeling pointless pain. We won't feel pain unless there's a reason. We stay on the couch, eat CCs and use a remote control, right? But if there's something of meaning behind it, I'll endure great pain. And that's how my athletes climb Mount Everest or do the Hawaiian Ironman or break the world record or do things, right? They have to connect to that thing of meaning. So when we're talking about stress and recovery, I'm always thinking about, I've got this person, they're not coping well, they seem to be struggling, suffering, whatever language you want to wrap around it. Often it's actually not what they're doing, it's they've lost the spotlight on the why. And if you can actually reconnect them to what this is about, all of a sudden, I'm going into work tomorrow and I'm going to fire that person, or I'm going to go to the board and stand up at my presentation and say, this is where we need to take this organisation strategically, or I'm going to go and talk to my sister about the fact that we need to do it. It's like all of a sudden you see people acting more congruently to what they want to do, and all of a sudden they report feeling more fresh and alive and energised. So it's not actually a deficit of recovery per se, it's their relationship to their stress or the pain. They're focusing on, this glass is hurting my feet. They're not focused on what's it in the service of. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Very interesting. And so in terms of, I guess, there are points in life where, there is the overload and the fatigue. And if I think through, even in my own, certainly in my water polo career, again, on reflection, I think back and I think, the things that were closest to derailing it were actually non-water polo. So, I had injuries and all that sort of stuff and managed those. They were all sort of within the realm of expectation in that domain. It was much more like, the biggest thing probably in that period was my parents' divorce. And I remember standing on the balcony with you, Chris O, down at South Bank, and saying to you, mate, I don't know what I'm doing here at training today, but, Dad just walked out last night and don't know what's going to happen from here. And just having that counsel and sort of continuing to train in sort of but a really sort of low grade, but and I think back and then the subsequent sort of flow-on effect of all of that, and I definitely feel like those sort of life events or the major sort of spikes where it was overload, like it had gone from 0 to exponential. And I'd be interested in both your thoughts in terms of physically, how do you handle or how do you look at programming or adapting or responding to a circumstance like that? Now with athletes, which I'm sure, I'm not the first, 50% of Australians have divorced parents, so that sort of stuff must happen all the time now. But what does that look like when it's gone from when it's not, we're not just talking about the day-to-day life, whether it's work or, training obviously, but work, family, what have you, but there's been this major event. What's the response like in a circumstance like that?
So
from a physical standpoint.
I think from, taking that example, one thing that I pride myself on is the relationships I have with my fellow co-workers or athletes or so forth. And I find when you actually have better relationships with people that you can, you're able to confide in me. And when you look at everything, whether it's a mental or a physical stress or a cognitive load, we talk about, in my world, stress. It's a load. And in the pure scientific world, you look at something like, they use this thing called training stress balance, which is time, so the amount of time that you're under stress versus what we call a rate of perceived exertion. So how hard you think something is from a scale of 1, being 1 out of 10, being not much, to 10 out of 10. So in terms of a stress, whether it's cognitive or physical, and you think about you're going through something which is it's ongoing. It's not like a normal session might be like say a 60-minute session. You might do a cardio session, might be an RP of 3 out of 10, pretty easy. That's 180 minutes. When you look at say something that's like a sprint session, flat out sprints, repeat sprints, might be 20 minutes, but it might be an RP of 9. So how do those two compare?
What's an RP, sorry?
RP is 9 out of 10, how hard something is.
Oh, okay.
Rate of perceived exertion.
Okay, yep.
So something's 9 out of 10, 20 minutes, it's 180 versus 3 times 60 minutes. It's the same kind of load. Like physiologically, what it does to our physiology is slightly different and our adaptations is different, but how do we quantify stress? And you took it like Toby, it's like, well, it's weeks and weeks, and the stress is, might be kind of, it's high, but it's just sitting there the whole time. So, I have to be conscious of that, but it's important at the same time that he needs something to escape from. So I said, look, I'm here for you, but if you need time away, you need to sort that out. And I guess in that sporting sense, he's lucky he's got the team around him. You've got psychologists, physiotherapists, biomechanists, and I guess in a working situation, I have my upline, I have my colleagues I work with, I go home, that's my support team that I have around them, and I guess it's how you use your support team to your advantage.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, for me, purely at that particular time, having a physical outlet was just super important, like the huge emotional stress, and a physical outlet was, and consistent. I knew what I was getting in for, in a session and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I certainly, but yeah, I'm just interested to hear how that responds to those sort of traumas or major events.
And I think the skill in also is being his strength coach is recognising the stress he's under, to kind of go, you know what, to be negotiating. So for me, I have like, what are my bare minimums that I want to get out? Bare minimums I want to get out of a session. I'll add some other stuff in because I think that's the cherry on the top. But at the end of the day, this is, if I could do one thing, get Toby to do one thing and one thing only, that's it. So if he kind of says, mate, I'm not feeling it today, beautiful, mate, we've got your one thing done. And I also, I don't know if I said to you, but I actually say to some athletes, if they're not feeling it, just need to get this one thing done. This is our most important thing for the day. And if they achieve that, I'm happy, and then they can go. So, and like in terms of like, at the end of the working day, I've got this to-do list, but these are my three most important things. My coaching is most important. I've got my my one program I've got to get done. And it's like, well, you know, I've got to be happy with that.
Yeah, cool.
For me, it's around, I use a bit of a Dr. Phil term, it's the duality of experience, in that I think we're very black and white often as humans. So something bad has happened, therefore can't go to work. Had a bad result at the boardroom, therefore need to go, you know, have a long lunch or whatever. It's like, you know, whereas if you can actually realise that as humans we're able to feel grief, fear, anxiety, anger, disappointment, joy, laughter, playfulness, curiosity simultaneously. You can actually go to work, and I remember, you know, my father passed away of a brain tumour. It took 2 years. It was a horrible end to his life. It wasn't great. There's no positive upside to that one. And I still went to work at time, you know, most of the time. And people would often say, "How are you going?" And I'd say, "Yeah, having a bit of a sad day." "Oh, do you need to go home, mate? What can we?" No, sorry, I didn't say I wasn't being effective. Didn't say I wasn't here to do a good job. I was just having a laugh at the coffee machine, actually. And you're giving yourself permission to have the duality of experience is often how I help athletes and executives move through their lives. Who life is tough. Tough things happen. But if we have to hit pause, you know, it's a bit like saying to an athlete, "Oh, don't run on the field till you're calm, clear and confident." Not many people would run on the field, right? And it's like, well, you know, all of us are going to be touched by grief, sadness, challenges, and it's, can I still choose to do the things that matter? And I can do that if I allow myself to not dismiss the challenge of grieving a divorce or an unwell relative, actually be real with that. Now, how do you know when you're not being real? When you're working such long hours that you're avoidant of actually connecting to that, right? So go to work, be effective, be good at what you do, but also don't stay there till midnight because you're not wanting to actually go to those thoughts. So it's that balance. Yeah, it's that balance of the duality means both.
Cool. Very interesting. So I am also then interested, I mean, recovery obviously is a topic, but there's also, Chris, you touched on it earlier, which is the preparation for. And I almost see that as a recovery or planning or you know, preparation for the bigger moments. So whether it's key negotiations, whether it's big decisions or important interviews that you've got, difficult conversation to be had with a spouse, those sorts of things. Anything really that holds personal importance. And I'm interested, I was again reading through Chris's stuff last night, and I texted him this morning and said I need to go downstairs and do a set of 3 squats at 30% of my PB, and with a blood flow restriction device on. And this is where he's getting to in terms of the preparation for performance. So down to protocols and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm interested to hear physically how do you what's the process that you get people to go to sort of get into a peak state, and then we'll do the same on the mental front.
Yeah, so it comes down to plan, really. We look at a competition or an important meeting or so forth, and we actually work back from that point of time. We keep talking about hormones, so think about it just as a marker. So it could be something about you get this feeling in your bones, or it could be you just have a how do you feel? I feel motivated today. We use this thing called testosterone, so it's related to strength and power, but it's also related to determination, assertiveness. And when you look at it, when you wake up in the morning, with cortisol, it peaks about 30 minutes and it just keeps declining throughout the day.
Quick explanation of cortisol.
Cortisol is your stress hormone. So,
okay.
So testosterone's your anabolic, it's your good hormone that everyone loves. Cortisol's, they see it as a bad hormone, but at times we need stress and we need to be able to learn to cope with stress. So it's not a bad thing, but in terms of performance, and actually we look at this other marker called the testosterone to cortisol ratio. So it's the interaction of the two. So it's nothing's clear cut, it's not the one answer. But in terms of what I do is I say, well, if we're declining throughout the day and we've got our most important competition in the afternoon or the evening, you think about grand final, it's in the evening. Or you think about you've got an afternoon meeting, What can we do to actually firstly offset the natural decline? So that's a trick on its own. But then what can we do leading into the main event that we can actually optimize performance? So, I'm thinking about, so traditionally, as I said earlier, in my realm, the best way to do that is to lift some heavy weights. You go in the gym, you lift quite heavy, short and sharp, and you actually get this beautiful spike in testosterone. But the key is that we need to be smarter in that, and so that's quite physical. It has a tax on its own. So how can we actually do it passively?
Doesn't work so well in an office either to have a squat rack for most people anyway.
Yeah, exactly right. So there's lots of passive ways to do it. So there's actually a really cool study on the use of vision, and so they had. You want me to explain this?
Yeah. Let's get into some nitty gritty.
So they had 6 different 2-minute clips. Control was nothing, a blank screen. Something that was sad, something that was slightly erotic, something that was big hits in rugby union because they were rugby union players, and UFC fighting. So something that was aggressive because it was kind of relevant to the cohort of athletes they used for the study. And then they looked at that pre-post. They took a saliva sample before and then watched it, and then afterwards, and then they went to the gym and they squatted. But what they found is that
it's a fundamental test. It's there's just nothing you can avoid.
Yeah,
you just can't avoid a squat. Like it's the one thing, isn't it, Chris? One thing.
No, you just bench.
Biceps.
Yeah. No one asks you how much you do a chin up with, So, and it's whatever is relevant. So for these people, it was rugby union play. So it was big hits in rugby union. There's a lot of people saying, it was the erotic stuff. It was watching a bit of soft porn or, do good. But it wasn't actually that. It's something that's relevant to the group of people. And lo and behold, they had the highest rise in testosterone, but they also had the highest squat performance. So that's by doing nothing. That's just by, getting into the zone, listening to the right type of music, having your routines that actually get you into that right place. And interestingly, that everything that I talk about here tonight in terms of a study actually started off in social studies. So I've accidentally flipped on a paper in the late 1970s that actually this was exactly the same study, but they didn't go out and squat. They just looked at hormone levels. They weren't quite thinking that far ahead.
They didn't have a penchant for squatting, mate.
No, obviously not. So a lot of this stuff actually originates in that kind of social settings. Looking at when you look at stock traders, they actually found the males who were the most bullish on the stock trading floor had higher testosterone levels. Like, you go into a group of people that the loud alpha male will traditionally have the highest T levels, and everyone will subsequently fall into place as a result of that. So you go into order. So these hormones, whether it's a marker or whether it's actually helping you, whether it's actually produced to help you perform, but I guess it's more about looking. So I look at competition here or my meetings here. What am I doing? I need to do my prep. I'm a warm up, but I have a period of time where I need to just decompress, because if I'm busy all the way up, I'm exhausted by the time my main competition has come around. And I need to understand that's a huge spike in our stress physiologically. So I need to match that with a down period. I need to prepare my body.
And what about like nutrition, coffee, stimulants, that sort of stuff? What else does that preparation look like?
Yeah, so nutrition plays a massive part. Caffeine is a performance enhancer in our world, but at the same time, for some people, it doesn't work. There's genes in our body which, when caffeine hits these receptors, it can make people anxious, and it can actually do the opposite. People get all jittery, and performance will go down. So it's been able to prepare to know that you need energy for long periods of time. So when they're out there competing, it's like, have you got your spare towel? Have you got your? We try and maintain body heat during our performance. So have you got the right tools with you during long periods of time? Because you want to prepare for the most unexpected. So if I keep talking, we do this thing called passive heat maintenance. So it's this blanket where it just as it's like roof insulation, that safety blanket stuff. So the reason why we do a warm up is to increase temperature in our muscles. So for every degree change in our muscle temp, we have 4% change in power. So I'll get to the point about being planned in a second. So Rio Olympics, everyone says, oh, it's going to be hot. And it was damn hot. But I did my research. I said, what's the lowest temperature in the history of Rio it's ever got during this period of time? And it was 18 degrees. So I did some study with 3 athletes. And I looked at temperatures and their reaction to when they warmed up and their clothing and so forth. So I gave them all a blanket and they said, oh, Chris, it's going to be too hot at Rio. I said, it's fine, but what happens if? So I got back, 4 blankets went out, 1, 2, 3 come back, and yeah, too hot, Chris, too hot. And then one athlete said to me, that blanket you gave me, it just hosed down with rain during the qualifying. And they had to go off and had to stop the qualifying. So they had 3 throws only to get to the final. And she's there and all the athletes are cold and they're just shivering and they're up and they're moving around and whatever. And she went, oh, I've got my little blanket. Pops it on, nice and warm and cozy. So she prepared for the unexpected. And that's what I see my role is that I'm looking at every nook and cranny going, I'm thinking, what if? And to the point where the athletes know that's who I am. But I think that's my role above and beyond. But I know that if they go into competition, they've got every bit of kit there, whether it's got the bag of lollies or, so I would have loved my cup of coffee, but you know what? I'm going to have my spike and I'm going to come down. I'm not going to be able to sustain my energy during my hour-long competition or meeting.
I'll jump in with caffeine there, mate. I reckon caffeine's the biggest thing I see in the corporate sector that is just haphazard. It's a social thing. Some days I had 2 or 3 or 4, had 2, had 1. There's often, everyone has their normal morning coffee at the same time. We're all pretty routinized in that. But the next coffee throughout the day, I see huge variance. This is no different. I just did an audit at a V8 supercar team. And the drivers were sitting around, they got a little Nespresso machine in their A trailer, and they're just bored. So, oh, another one? Yeah, another one, like this. And they're just ingesting caffeine randomly, as in, and I was like, what's your protocol here? I got back from Le Mans where I had the whole 7 days mapped out of when the drivers were having their caffeine, because I know 45 minutes before it hits peak levels in your blood, then you got to get really accurate with when you're taking your caffeine. And I just work with a lot of my executives when I'm coaching them. I'm like, let's talk about your caffeine protocol throughout the day. And when's your critical meetings? When do you need to be on? When are you getting that? When do you hit your slump? What food are you taking? You want to look at these things. If the corporate world's competitive, you've got to be the best you can be to beat your opponents and get those contracts or what have you. Yet, the amount of people who are just overdosing on caffeine, your body has homeostatic response, right? Homeostasis is, if you take a stimulant, your brain very quickly goes, I need something else to counterbalance that, right? So that's why people yawn before competition. I don't know if you've ever seen inside the sheds of a footy club. Big game, massive, the bigger the occasion, more people are yawning. And people go, what are all the guys yawning? It's because their anxiety and their adrenaline kicks in, and then your body goes, oh, too wired, too high, and they give you a counter drug. Your brain releases a counter, and then that just makes you sleepy, right? So you see all these people before the grand final yawning, right? Well, I see people in the corporate sector overdosing on caffeine, and then all of a sudden sitting in a meeting and feeling really, really droopy. So that's one tip I'd say walk away from, is stop, reflect upon your timings of your caffeine and when you're taking them relative to what your workday looks like.
Yeah, cool. And certainly, I mean, both sounds of things, it's so personal as well in terms of how people get up and what it looks like for them. And so a reflection process to understand what's worked and a practice and giving yourself a baseline so then you can then move forward from that. Makes a fair bit of sense. Guys, we're wrapping up our discussion, so then we can open up to you guys. But 2 final questions for you. Do you have go-to books, tools or resources that you wish all of your athletes and clients had to study or use, like mandatory?
Oh, okay. My tagline is fish oil and mindfulness. There's only 2 panaceas in the world: eat more oily fish, get some omega-3s for the brain to actually function and work, and do mindfulness. And so there's so much resources out there, right? I mean, a favourite book of mine is a great colleague of mine, Russ Harris, who wrote The Happiness Trap. That's a really cool read, right? It talks a bit about changing the relationship to your thoughts. So so the cortisol levels don't get as high because your relationship to those stressful triggers is seen in a different way, where you can unhook So that's a great read, The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. But even if you don't do that, get on,
Fish oil and mindfulness.
Fish oil and mindfulness.
Can I ask you? You said in our prep that you would run that mindfulness doesn't have to be like a year-long retreat in the mountains, right? So,
matter of fact, it's actually done poorly. When I love speaking to people going, I've been really stressed, Jonah. What'd you do? I went to a retreat at the back of Byron. Fantastic. How was it? It was great. We sat by a river. We did meditation every day. We ate really clean food. It was wonderful. I say, how long have you been back? I've been back about 4 or 5 weeks. And how are you feeling now? I think I've got to go back. I'm feeling stressed. And it's like, that's not really the intention, right? Like if every time you feel stressed, you've got to run off to, Byron and lie by a river. So for me, when I'm doing mindfulness, I do it in hotel rooms, beside busy highways. I don't need the quiet, tranquil setting because you're preparing for a noisy brain. So if you can't learn to do mindfulness in noisy settings, then you probably haven't learnt the skill. And it doesn't need to be half an hour sitting on a Bodhi tree going, because that's not me, it's not my personality, and your brain doesn't need it. So my tip on mindfulness is you can do what's called a 4 and 8 breath. Simplest thing in the world, and you do it maybe 3 or 4 times, and if you do it 3 times a day, and my maths tells me that's about 3 or 4 minutes of your working day. But if you do that over a 6-week period, we'll see a change in the neural pathways of your prefrontal cortex, which is the area you use for focus. Whenever you say, I just need to focus more at work, do the following. And everyone can do it right here, right now. You can close your eyes if you want to, leave your eyes open, but tune into your breath, and I want you to breathe in for 4 seconds and out for 8 seconds. As you're doing it, you'll have chatter. Don't worry about that. Just come back to the in for 4, out for 8. We're going to do it about 3 times. And then maybe just notice the chair you're sitting in. You've been there all night so far, but now just notice it. Just feel body weight, hard, soft, cold. Is your body weight even, slightly one side? And you can bring yourself back into the room. That's mindfulness. That's as simple as it needs to be. Do 3 loops of breathing in for 4 and 8, and do that at morning, lunch, and the afternoon, and you'll have a daily mindfulness practice. You don't do it when you're stressed, because that is then responding to the stress and you're trying to run away from the stress. You make it a habit that is independent of where you're at in terms of your emotional response. So a daily practice of that, it's 3 or 4 minutes of your day. And I don't know, I once had a very manic, high-paced CEO tell me, Jonah, I don't have time in my day even for that, buddy. And I went, do you go to the toilet? I said, do you go to the toilet? What do you mean? I said, do you go to the toilet? Don't be smart. Of course I go to the toilet. Okay. Next time you're having a piss, mate, all I want you to do is listen to the sound of the stream. So don't tell me there's not time for your mindfulness. You can find it anywhere. If my racing car driver can do it for 1.2 seconds down the back straight of Le Mans at 370 k's an hour, and what he does is every second lap, he hits the drink bottle button on his steering wheel. The engineer, I've told not to speak to the driver, and all he does is chase the cold water down his throat and just feel it. 1.2 seconds doing 370 k's an hour, and he's back into the apex and he does the next lap. Okay, if he can do that and win a world championship, I think you can find more than 1.2 seconds in your day. Yeah.
Cool. Chriso, go-to tools, resources?
Yeah, I really like that because I had a colleague say, if you should do 15 minutes of meditation a day, and if you can't find 15 minutes, you need to find 30. So, and there's nothing like I think what I do is I just talk to a lot of people, and I find that I need short snippets of time, so podcast thoughts. I do remember though when I was a lot younger, so for me communication has been key in my world. How to win friends and influence people kind of just still sits deep somewhere in my brain. I remember giving that to my sisters. I don't think they ever read it, but there's yeah, but probably really got no epiphany there for you.
That's okay. Well, maybe one technique that you would absolutely practice in a physical recovery sense. What would be one thing that if you could only choose one technique to practice, what would that be?
For me, it's actually exercise. It's my time out, and that's my drug. There was a time, so I work in a gym, And my first 3 months at the Gold Coast Suns, I didn't work out once. And I felt awful. So it was the middle of summer, and I said, I've got to get back into it. And so when I go on holidays like we're on a cruise, I find a boat. If not, I'm lifting chairs. I'm holding on to the back of stairs, finding equipment, and that's,
I would love to stumble across you lifting chairs on the back of a boat.
But it's an interesting point, right? And all the evidence shows that people go, I can't go for a run. I don't have 30 or 40 minutes in my day. Yet we know that if you just go for a 10-minute walk, jog around the block, you'll still get those ergogenic benefits. So that the whole mental model of I can't squeeze that meditation or that exercise into my day, do 42 seconds of mindfulness and a 7-minute walk, jog around the block, and you'll be in a much better state. So don't get caught up in the whole, I need that hour and a half in my day to do exercise or meditation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Over to you guys. For anyone have any questions, now's the time to hit them with some tough ones. So question being basically, how do you take the lessons in a physical sense into a corporate environment to get into a peak state?
So I'll just look at events the same as a corporate event. There's a period of planning which goes into it, and then you look at the amount of stress and the load, and then you're talking about the period coming into it, or the day of, what's the time of your competition or the time of your meeting, and then you have your period of time. You have I guess an acute period of time lead up, so that hour. So what time you get into the ground, what time you get into the meeting, in terms of the warm up. So if you're going through certain key elements that you want to make sure that you're focusing on during a meeting, that they're there front and center, so you're really clear. There's that period of time, what we call a core room, where it's time to actually decompress and actually just get into that zone. Go back into early in the day. What time are you waking up? So you're making sure that you have enough waking time. Are you getting the right fuel in? So in terms of you might do if you're an avid exerciser, why don't you get your exercise done in the morning so you're actually feeling good about yourself physically, and that physical and mental side really works in quite closely together. Going back one day further, the afternoon, we sometimes look at what we might be doing in the afternoon to set us up hormonally and physically better. So if you're traveling, sometimes we have a 6 o'clock flight in the morning because we want to get to Canberra for a certain meeting, and then I've got to get up at 4 o'clock, and then actually saying, well, for my performance, it's actually better if I travel the night before. So it's that balance of the two. So traveling to the competition, make sure what time am I getting up to plan, and that period of time where your competition is your highest stress of the day, and so that's your peak. So you want to make sure that whatever you've got beforehand has a lower cognitive load, or for us it's a physical load, so it'd be a cognitive load. So your RPE, your perceived exertion, would be really low. It's some menial tasks. And then as you're getting closer, you want to get rid of your distractions. So it might be you don't want to be answering shut your emails off for a certain point, because if you get that one email that comes at the wrong time, that could have that cascading effect, and all of a sudden you're thinking about.
And physically, even I guess to get specific there, is there is it worth someone rocking up, finding a private place and doing 10 squats in the hallway 10 minutes before the meeting?
If it's all individual, if that's what gets you going, it might be going for a walk, it might be 4 breaths in, 8 breaths, 4 in, 8 out. It's all about finding what works, and then I think also it's the reflection process post. Being able to sit down and take time out to go, well, was it successful? Yes or no? For us, it's easy. It's a distance or a time. But even within that, so we talk about process, not outcome. So what are my 3 key things I'm looking at doing? And if I get my 1 or 3 things right, the outcome will work. So which I try and talk to the athletes about, technically this is what you got to do. I don't care about how far you throw, because if you get this right, and it's once again, it's about if you're in a team, it's the language you're using. So, if we get these 3 things right, this will happen as a result.
For me, I probably echoing similar stuff, but you know, get your nutrition right. So often when you're on the road, going to meetings, you're eating on the road. So no, eat your slow release GI food, so your birch muesli or whatever you know is going to sustain you. Watch the sugary intake and coffees with extra sugars and what have you. Phone off, obviously, you know, flight mode, because you want to, like Chris said, just, you know, sit with your own thoughts or do whatever. And I love looking at people's diary. So I'll often sit down with somebody's EA and work through it and just be like, so the critical meeting's here, and you're telling me she's working her ass off in the lead up to that because there's so much to, and so that you're going into that meeting cooked. Like, what are you doing? Like, oh, exactly that. We wouldn't do that leading into a grand final. But there's so much to do. So you're better off actually not going in, and you might feel, oh, but we're underdone. You're going to be better a little bit underdone in that one area, but actually cognitively fresh and clear and able to think on your feet and be real and just admit what you don't know and, you know, be the best version of yourself than just being like a zombie, where that's when you don't get the gig because people just look at you and go, you know. So for me, I look at a week leading in and the cycle. Where's your downtime? Where's your active recovery? Where's your passive recovery? And what we all do is we say, busy. First thing that goes when we say we're busy, ourselves. Yeah, what's the most critical piece in the whole puzzle? So for me, meeting requests get put in for, you know, well-being, recovery, and that's like I'm meeting with the president of the board. That's that important, and it doesn't get taken out. It might just get moved because things happen in business. You've got to be a bit flexible, but it doesn't get taken out. That piece of active recovery or passive recovery is in my weekly schedule, and the timing of it has to be relevant to critical pieces within the week.
And to reinforce how important that week leading in is, so in actually some of my work and some other people's work, the response of what we're seeing around midweek, so 3 days before a game, was actually being able to predict outcome. In three different, one was in Bath, one was with the rugby league team, and one was with the England team. So there's an importance of what's happening throughout the whole week to actually set you up to that point. And that just hones in on how, and we all think about competition day or the day leading in, and you know, and when you're having meetings week in, week out, it's important to actually understand your weekly flow. It's got to, you know, when we train, everything's got to flow. So if you're having a hard session, where's your down session? If you're going 7 days a week, you know, so I'll cycle on 3 weeks on, 1 week off. There's got to be a down week somewhere, and I'll actually make sure that's down. They've still got to train, or they've still got to turn up and go to work. And that's actually pretty good
psychologically too, that idea of 3 on, 1 off. So if you look at your work calendar and say we're going to go really hard for 3, and then 1 week we're going to need a little bit of a later start, we're going to need a long lunch, we're going to go whatever, it's actually quite smart from both a physical and a psychological standpoint of, are we decompressing our staff, you know, every 4th week to allow a bit of that regeneration. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. So sustainable practices of CEOs to navigate the intense, you know, daily stresses of the corporate world. It's everything I've pretty well touched upon, right? They normally have, they're readers, so you don't shut down your capacity for learning. So here's the thing. Doing things that are challenging is the true definition of happiness. So if you want to talk about recovery and well-being, and you've got to talk about thriving. What is thriving? And you know, the example I always use is I don't do my 10-year-old nephew's crossword puzzle. It's a little bit easy for me and quite boring, doesn't really excite me. But the Guardian Quick, I don't do the Guardian Cryptic or the Times Cryptic, just makes me feel stupid. I don't know the rules. My dad used to be able to do them, I can't. Activates my perfectionism, no good, all right? You know, frustration at 8 a.m, no, not happy. But the Quick, I can get maybe a third over brekkie, maybe another third in the commute, or, you know, and then I love it, you know, around mid-morning when it's like, yes, and fill one more. Now, I don't get the whole thing every day. Now, once, maybe every 6 months, I fill it out and I feel amazing. But the point is, right, why do I love doing it? Because it's that sweet spot of my intelligence, capacity, whatever you want to call it, and the challenge. So when you talk about true happiness in human beings, it's not hedonism. It's not licking ice creams and listening to pop music. It's doing things that challenge us. And so when you talk about what do I see in the corporate space? It's finding things in your day and your week that still give you a sense of challenge and stretch. Whereas what happens when we get busy or stressed is we often take those things out of our lives. We stop doing the preparing for the half marathon. We stop trying to win that client because it's a real complex one, or solve that puzzle, or we avoid and we go to a place of safety. So I always say keep moving into the discomfort and doing challenging things. So reading, learning is good daily daily habit. Mindfulness, yep, daily mindfulness, definitely. A lot of the people that I've introduced that to have spoken about the transformative nature of that, wow, I always avoided it because I always thought I had to go hang out with those hippies and spend half an hour doing those. And now that I know I can just do it, I can do mindful coffee drinking. I can just taste the bitterness of the coffee and the temperature and just, that's just my quick reset. And then I go into that meeting and I'm just so much clearer, Jonah. So engaging with some practice around that is pretty consistent. Yeah, I really like that. But keeping challenge in your life as well as practicing daily mindfulness.
You also recommend that interaction or diversity around different domains.
Correct. Yeah. The best. Great. Yeah. And the best one I call it the pinball effect. I say to people, I know you're time poor. I know you've got multiple things. Can you think of one activity that's like a pinball, could maybe hit 2 or 3 domains in the same activity? The example I'd use, I was doing a thing with a bunch of government execs a couple of years ago, and Jonah, I go to the park on the weekend with my kids and we spend a good couple of hours, playing, and I don't know, just, and I was doing this exercise around values and domains, and I said, can you think of something that maybe you used to do something that actually you could just reignite? And he had this little epiphany, and he actually got quite teary. It was really cool. He goes, I used to take the kids and the wife down to the Gold Coast to visit my best mate who's also got kids, and would take our Malibus out and teach our kids how to surf. And I said, interesting. What are we touching there? He goes, well, parenting. But also my wife and his wife get along really well, and that's a nice connection. There's health and fitness because we both get to go and paddle our surfboard. We get to teach our kids a new skill, which is really cool to see them do that. I love the environment. I'm a bit of a hippie at heart, and actually getting out in the surf and connecting to nature. And all of a sudden, and I said, how long is that going to take? He goes, like 2 or 3 hours. Same amount of time I was spending at the bloody New Farm Park. I said, right. So when we are time poor, try to pick activities that can nurture multiple domains in the one activity. And you might find you just go to work on that Monday going, how's your weekend? Oh, it's really good. And why? Why was it good? If you reverse engineer why it was good, it normally means you did something that was of meaning and connected you to multiple domains of value. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I actually have been thinking and talking about that exact concept is as a stack. If you answer 4 questions like, who is most important to me, what is most important to me, what do I do when I'm at my best, and then what are my values essentially, and I guess this ties into all that stuff, right? But and how do I stack those 4 things? And if you can architect those kind of experiences with absolute clarity and absolute certainty that you're going to have a good time, basically, and be fulfilled and nourished and energized and all those sorts of things, with very little marginal effort, and maximum upside.
Well, there's no more minutes in the day.
Yeah.
So you've got to make them work, right? That's all. Just work backwards. Work takes up a big chunk. Family and other things take up big chunks. So make the things you do matter. Sleep's my number 1 thing. Sleep's your honesty test, right? Sleep, you can't lie. Sleep tells you where you're at generally. Look, you can use the watches and do that. They're a bit dodgy. They track movement, not sleep. So you want to be careful not to buy into the exact scientific nature of them. But they're a pretty good indicator. But how did I sleep? How refreshed am I? There's sleep quantity and sleep quality. Yeah, sleep. They're both important. We know in the sporting domain, 4 nights of impoverished sleep, you're at a 20% increased chance of a hamstring tear. So we track sleep really closely because we know we can put athletes at risk if they're but if they have 1 or 2 poor nights sleep, you get on with it, right? That every athlete before the Olympics doesn't sleep, so you don't get too caught up in a few nights of poor sleep. But if you're getting chronic impoverished sleep, we know that has massive correlates with things like mood disturbance, cognitive function, attention, irritability, decision making. Your working memory, the ability to remember somebody's mobile phone number just gets reduced as soon as you're sleep deprived. First thing the CIA do with terrorists, sleep deprivation, right? Much better than hurting, waterboarding, sleep debt. So sleep's massive. I track that one and encourage people to get some good sleep habits around that. It's so individual.
So hacks for sleeping was what Reuben was saying.
General rule of thumb: no caffeine past 2:30 in the afternoon. Blue screen stuff, you want to shut that down. Obviously, there's some people get into that stuff, but you're not going to stop them doing that. But you can help them with the timing of it and mindfulness. So the worst thing you can do when you try to sleep is try to sleep. So trying to relax when you're trying to sleep, you end up in a fight with the internal dialogue and it ends up escalating, and then you're worrying that you're not sleeping, which introduces what's called metacognitive worry, which is the worry that you're not sleeping. And then, so the worst thing you do with an athlete is say, you've got to sleep, right? It's when you're not sleeping, we know that if you do mindfulness or meditation, you take yourself into stage 3 sleep, which is just as effective physiologically over about a 6-week period. You can sustain that. So if you start to get into really good, and mindfulness isn't easy, right? Mindfulness is paying attention, mind wanders, catching that, coming back. Don't be fooled. Mindfulness isn't going, oh, that's impossible. It's paying attention to something on purpose. Your mind will always wander. You catch it and you come back. So some people go, oh, Jonah, I'm really bad at that mindfulness. And they describe it to me. Oh, my mind was wandering. Okay, well, what happened when it did? Oh, well, I did what you said. I said, oh, there's my mind. And I came back to the breath. But, geez, I didn't stay on the breath for long. It wandered again. What did you do? Well, I caught it and I came back. And what a brilliant mindfulness session. Don't be fooled. It's not about staying in that zone, right? But if you learn to do mindfulness well and you're lying in bed, one of two things will happen. You'll either just do that for most of the night and you'll get a good recovery effect, or you'll wake up in the morning and somewhere along the line you've actually drifted off. But by not trying to get to sleep. It's, okay, I may not sleep tonight. I've got to go present to the board. Whew, and I'm pretty bubbly right now. That's okay. I'm just going to lie here and just do my mindful little breath work and see what happens. The acceptance of I may not sleep tonight either means you don't, but you get recovered, or you fall asleep.
One other thing around that, particularly in those sort of foreseeable anxious states, right? The night before a big presentation or whatever that might be. Yeah. I've heard is make sure you get a good night's sleep 2 nights before.
Yeah.
Because you know you're not going to get a good one.
Correct.
And then at least you've got your tank full.
Yeah, correct.
Sleep
debt.
And then
you want to keep an eye on sleep debt. Exactly. Yeah.
It's both, and the body actually likes movement. I think we just have led to a massive sedentary lifestyle. Things are just really easy for us, and we respond to moving. That's probably the major one. We're not made to sit down. We're not made to be still.
Sorry. Should have made this a walking meeting.
Yeah. And to that, psychophysiologically, when we do active things, we release good neurochemicals. And things like, again, the cortisol versus the testosterone, is really important to look at that. So doing things releases those activities, those neurochemicals typically. So that's what we're actually after. We feel exhausted, but you go for a little bit of mild exercise and you actually come back with more energy. That's coming from the neurochemicals.
We've probably got time for one more question, and then just in terms of keeping to time, and appreciate that we did start a bit late, so thanks everyone. So if we take one more question, and then if anyone wants to, we will be reconvening over at the Broncos Leagues Club if anyone wants to head over there for a bite or a drink.
And to talk further, happy to chat further.
Yeah, chat some more, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so how do we create psychological expansion? How do we grow? So the basic principle is changing the relationship to your internal dialogue, the stuff that you've traditionally classified as unwanted. So when I'm anxious about the presentation tomorrow, so my solution is to overthink it and ruminate lots to try to reduce my uncertainty because I don't want to feel the anxiety of how I might go tomorrow, so I'm trying to increase my certainty. I say, how's that working for you, champ? Well, I'm lying here, not sleeping, doing heaps of thinking, trying to increase my certainty. And I say, okay, and because I'm feeling anxious. So what are you actually doing? I'm doing lots of thinking. What's the definition of worry? Worry is, thinking lots? Okay. What's a symptom of anxiety? Worry. Oh, so your solution to being anxious is engaging in excessive thinking, which is worry, which is a symptom of anxiety. So no wonder, see where we're going? So if I said to you, why are you engaging in that strategy? Why do you keep going down that rabbit hole? And normally it is, I don't like feeling uncertain. So if I said, how about we just change that relationship? How many years have you been feeling uncertain before a presentation, or before getting a contract, or before asking that girl out, or before going onto that rugby field, or before, now you mention it, probably my whole conscious life. Okay, what's the likelihood it's going to show up tomorrow and the next day? And
it's like, why haven't you made friends with that?
Yeah.
Why haven't you made peace with that?
Right.
Let's use it as a...
Right. So a really cool technique is called diffusion, which is just learning to see thoughts as just thoughts. I like to name my thoughts. You know, a little thought bubble outside of my head. I call mine the chatter. I get a chatter. I had chatter as I was driving up the highway here tonight. Oh, what do I want to speak about? Hopefully I don't stuff up and embarrass myself. Hope I don't let Toby down. Chatter. I've done public speaking for 18 years, but yet I still have chatter, right? But I just smirked and went, oh, thanks, Mike. Just chat about, about time you showed up, 45 minutes before I'm on stage, right? So now, instead of it grabbing me and me responding to it and trying to get rid of it and, you know, going through my content and, you know, I could rock up here with my slides in my pocket and, you know, and end up doing a poor presentation because I'm trying to not feel discomfort. Or I could go, it's okay to feel discomfort. So it's about changing your relationship. When I no longer see fear as bad, or sadness as bad, or grief as bad, or anger as bad, or frustration as bad, or my perfectionism, just see it as for what it is, then when it shows up, I don't have to do anything to get rid of it. Now, if I don't have to get rid of it, I can just let it be there. Guess what I can do? I can still write that email. I can still performance manage that underperforming staff member. I can still go to that board meeting and pitch with that chatter there. Whereas if I have to stop what I'm doing every time the chatter shows up, no wonder I'm, you know, or acting on it, or drinking, or doing, or suppressing, or, you know. So the biggest way to increase your expansion is to allow those thoughts, feelings, memories, images to come, and when they show up, just be there and just make some room for them, but not be defined by them. Now there's room for me to keep doing what I'm doing, yeah? And a little bit of Nike, you know? Nike isn't just do it when you feel good, it's just do it. It's about saying, I might be feeling this discomfort or whatever, but here today I need to do A, B, and C in the office, so let's get it done, you know? And then you update your mental model that I can keep doing those things. But yeah, expansion's about not reducing your discomfort, it's increasing your willingness to feel it, but letting go of the struggle with it. Fear, doubt, worry, and anxiety is not the problem in people's lives. It's our attempt to get rid of it. The struggle through micromanaging, overthinking, taking tablets and alcohol and distraction, and that's all in the attempt of trying to control it, and that's what takes us away from being the best version of ourselves. People who thrive and shine in life aren't all positive. They actually feel probably more of the tough stuff because they're doing things that are really hard, but they're okay at feeling the discomfort. So I call it comfort with discomfort. Comfort with discomfort. You don't call an ambulance when you've got lactic acid when you're a rugby player, right? Okay. So why do people call an ambulance when they're feeling a bit of anxiety or sadness or grief when they've got something that's scary, sad, or hard in their life? It makes sense that it's there. Just don't worry that it's there. Be okay with it.
Cool. Well, yeah, look, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks to you guys. Thanks for the questions. Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks, Jonah. It's been awesome. Thanks to Luz for helping out as well. And thanks to the Broncos, yeah. So.